There is a chamber in Jesus College, the existence of which is probably known to few who are now resident, and fewer still have penetrated into it, or even seen its interior. It is on the right hand of the landing on the top floor of the precipitous staircase which, for some forgotten story connected with it, is traditionally called Cow Lane. The padlock which secures its massive oaken door is very rarely unfastened, for the room is bare and unfurnished. Once it served as a place of deposit for superfluous kitchenware, but even that ignominious use has passed from it, and it is now left to undisturbed solitude and darkness. For I should say that it is entirely cut off from the light of the outer day by the walling up, some time in the 18th century, of its single window, and such light as ever reaches it come from the door, when rare occasion causes it to be opened. Yet at no extraordinarily remote day this chamber has evidently been tenanted, and, before it was given up to the darkness, was comfortably fitted, according to the standard of comfort which was known in college in the days of George II. There is still a roomy fireplace before which legs have been stretched, and wine and gossip have circulated in the days of wigs and brocade. For the room is spacious, and, when it was lighted by the window looking eastward over the fields and common, it must have been a cheerful place for the sociable don. Let me state in brief prosaic outline the circumstances which account for the gloom and solitude in which this room has remained now for nearly a century and a half. In the second quarter of the 18th century the university possessed a great variety of clubs of a social kind. There were clubs in college parlours and clubs in private rooms, or in inns and coffee-houses. Clubs flavoured with politics, clubs clerical, clubs purporting to be learned and literary. Whatever their professed particularity, the aim of each was convivial. Some of them, which included undergraduates as well as seniors, were dissipated enough, and in their limited provincial way aped the profligacy of such clubs as the Hellfire Club of London notoriety. Among these last was one which was at once more select and of more evil fame than any of its fellows. By a singular accident, presently to be explained, the minute book of this club, including the years from 1738 to 1766, came into the hands of the master of Jesus College, and though, so far as I am aware, it is no longer extant, I have before me a transcript of it which, though it is in a recent handwriting, presents in a bald shape such a singular array of facts that I must ask you to accept them as veracious. The original book is described as a stout duodecimo volume bound in red leather and fastened with red silken strings. The writing in it occupied some 40 pages, and ended with the date November 2nd, 1766. The club in question was called the Everlasting Club, a name sufficiently explained by its rules set forth in the pocket-book. Its number was limited to 7, and it would seem that its members were all young men between 22 and 30. One of them was a fellow commoner of Trinity. 3 of them were fellows of colleges, among whom I should especially mention a fellow of Jesus, named Charles Belassis. Another was a landed proprietor in the county, and the 6th was a young Cambridge physician. The founder and president of the club was the Honourable Alan Dermot, who, as the son of an Irish peer, had obtained a nobleman's degree in the university, and lived in idleness in the town. Very little is known of his life and character, but that little is highly in his disfavour. He was killed in a duel in Paris in the year 1743, under circumstances which I need not particularize, but which point to an exceptional degree of cruelty and wickedness in the slain man. I will quote from the first page of the minute-book some of the laws of the club, which will explain its constitution. 1. This society consisteth of 7 everlastings, who may be corporeal or incorporeal, as destiny may determine. 2. The rules of the society, as herein written, are immutable and everlasting. 3. None shall hereafter be chosen into the society, and none shall cease to be members. 4. The Honourable Aaron Dermot is the everlasting president of the society. 5. The senior corporeal everlasting, not being president, shall be the secretary of the society, and in the book of minutes shall record its transactions, the date at which any everlasting shall cease to be corporeal, and all fines due to the society. And when such senior everlasting shall cease to be corporeal, he shall, either in person, or by some sure hand, deliver this book of minutes to him who shall be next senior, and at the time corporeal. And he shall in like manner record the transactions therein, and transmit it to the next senior. The neglect of these provisions shall be visited by the President with fine or punishment according to his discretion. 6. On the 2nd day of November in every year, being the feast of All Souls, at 10 o'clock post-meridium, the everlastings shall meet at supper in the place of residence of that corporeal member of the society to whom it shall fall in order of rotation to entertain them, and they shall all subscribe in this book of minutes their names and present place of abode. 7. It shall be the obligation of every everlasting to be present at the yearly entertainment of the society, and none shall allege for excuse that he has not been invited thereto. If any everlasting shall fail to attend the yearly meeting, or in his turn shall fail to provide entertainment for the society, he shall be mulcted at the discretion of the President. 8. Nevertheless, if in any year, in the month of October, and not less than 7 days before the Feast of All Souls, the major part of the society, that is to say, 4 at least, shall meet and record in writing in these minutes that it is their desire that no entertainment be given in that year, then, notwithstanding the 2 rules rehearsed, there shall be no entertainment in that year, and no everlasting shall be mulcted on the grounds of his absence. The rest of the rules are either too profane or too puerile to be quoted here. They indicate the extraordinary levity with which the members entered on their preposterous obligations. In particular, to the omission of any regulation as to the transmission of the minute book after the last everlasting ceased to be corporeal, we owe the accident that it fell into the hands of one who was not a member of the society, and the consequent preservation of its contents to the present day. Low as was the standard of morals in all classes of the university in the first half of the 18th century, the flagrant defiance of public decorum by the members of the Everlasting Society brought upon it the stern censure of the authorities, and after a few years it was practically dissolved and its members banished from the university. Charles Bellasis, for instance, was obliged to leave the college, and, though he retained the fellowship, he remained absent from it for nearly 20 years. But the minutes of the society reveal a more terrible reason for its virtual extinction. Between the years of 1738 and 1743, the minutes record many meetings of the club, for it met on other occasions besides that of All Souls' Day. Apart from a great deal of impious jocularity on the part of the writers, they are limited to the formal record of the attendance of the members, fines inflicted, and so forth. The meeting on November 2nd in the latter year is the first about which there is any departure from the stereotyped forms. The supper was given in the house of the physician. One member, Henry Davenport, the former fellow commoner of Trinity, was absent from the entertainment, as he was then serving in Germany in the Dettingen campaign. The minutes contain an entry: Moctatus propter absentium per presidentem Henry Davenport. An entry on the next page of the book runs: Henry Davenport by a cannon shot became an incorporeal member November 3rd, 1743. The minutes give in their handwriting, under the date November 2nd, the names and addresses of the 6 other members. First in the list, in a large bold hand, is the autograph of Alan Dermot, President, at the court of His Royal Highness. Now in October Dermot had certainly been in attendance on the young pretender at Paris, and doubtless the address which he gave was understood at the time by the other everlastings to refer to the fact. But on October the 28th, 5 days before the meeting of the club, he was killed, as I have already mentioned, in a duel. The news of his death cannot have reached Cambridge on November the 2nd, for the secretary's record of it is placed below that of Davenport, and with the date of November the 10th. This day was reported that the president was become an incorporeal by the hands of a French chevalier, and in a sudden ebullition, which is in glaring contrast with his previous profanities, he has dashed down. The good God shield us from ill. The tidings of the president's death scattered the everlastings like a thunderbolt. They left Cambridge and buried themselves in widely parted regions. But the club did not cease to exist. The secretary was still bound to his hateful records. The 5 survivors did not dare to neglect their fatal obligations. Horror of the presence of the president made the November gathering once and for ever impossible. But the horror, too, forbade them to neglect the meeting in October of every year to put in writing their objection to the celebration. For 5 years 5 names are appended to that entry, in the minutes, and that is all the business of the club. Then another member died, who was not the secretary. For 18 more years 4 miserable men met once each year to deliver the same formal protest. During these years we gather from the signatures that Charles Bellasis returned to Cambridge, now, to appearance, chastened and decorous. He occupied the rooms which I have described on the staircase on the corner of the cloister. Then, in 1766, comes a new handwriting and an altered minute. January 27th, on this day, Francis Witherington, secretary, became an incorporeal member. The same day this book was delivered to me, James Harvey. Harvey lived only a month, and a similar entry on March the 7th states that the book has descended, with the same mysterious celerity, to William Catherton. Then, on May the 18th, Charles Bellasis writes that on that day, being the day of Catherton's decease, the minute book has come to him as the last surviving corporeal of the club. As it is my purpose to record fact only, I shall not attempt to describe the feelings of the unhappy secretary when he penned that fatal record. When Witherington died, it must have come home to the 3 survivors that after 23 years' intermission the ghastly entertainment must be annually renewed, with the addition of fresh incorporeal guests, or that they must undergo the pitiless censure of the president. I think it likely that the terror of the alternative, coupled with the mysterious delivery of the minute book, was answerable for the speedy decease of the first 2 successors to the secretaryship. Now that the alternative was offered to Bellasis alone, he was firmly resolved to bear the consequences, whatever they might be, of an infringement of the club rules. The graceless days of George II had passed away from the university. They were succeeded by times of outward respectability, where religion and morals were no longer publicly challenged. With Bellasis, too, the petulance of youth had passed. He was discreet, perhaps exemplary. The scandal of his early conduct was unknown to most of the new generation, condoned by the few survivors who had witnessed it. On the night of November 2nd, 1766, a terrible event revived in the older inhabitants of the college the memory of those evil days. From 10 o'clock to midnight a hideous uproar went on in the chamber of Bellasis. Who were his companions none knew. Blasphemous outcries and ribald songs, such as had not been heard for 20 years past, aroused from sleep or study the occupants of the court. But among the voices was not that of Bellasis. At 12 a sudden silence fell upon the cloisters, but the master lay awake all night, troubled at the relapse of a respected colleague, and the horrible example of libertinism set to his pupils. In the morning all remained quiet about Bellas's chamber. When his door was opened soon after daybreak, the early light creeping through the drawn curtains revealed a strange scene. About the table were drawn 7 chairs, but some of them had been overthrown, and the furniture was in chaotic disorder, as after some wild orgy. In the chair at the foot of the table sat the lifeless figure of the secretary, his head bent over his folded arms, as though he would shield his eyes from some horrible sight. Before him on the table lay pen, ink, and the red minute-book. On the last inscribed page, under the date of November 2nd, were written, for the first time since 1742, the autographs of the 7 members of the Everlasting Club, but without address. In the same strong hand in which the president's name was written there was appended below the signatures the note, Mulctus per presidentem proptum neglectum obsonii, Charles Bellasis. The minute-book was secured by the master of the college, and I believe that he alone was acquainted with the nature of its contents. The scandal reflected on the college by the circumstances revealed in it caused him to keep the knowledge rigidly to himself. But some suspicion of the nature of the occurrences must have percolated to students and servants, for there was a long-standing belief in the college that annually on the night of November 2nd, sounds of unholy revelry were heard to issue from the chamber of Charles Bellasis. I cannot learn that the occupants of the adjoining rooms have ever been disturbed by them. Indeed, it is plain from the minutes that, owing to their improvident drafting, no provision was made for the perpetuation of the All Souls' entertainment after the last everlasting ceased to be corporeal. Such superstitious belief must be treated with contemptuous incredulity. But, whether for that cause or another, the rooms were shut up, and have remained tenantless from that day to this.